Welcome back to The Doctor Will See You Now for another consultation, another probe into an author's work and craft. Hang on to your hats. We might be in for a bit of a bumpy ride, but what a wonderful, wonderful read. I think it's a very brave novel to have created. I also think it is an absolutely thriller of a ride. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dan Malakin. Is that how we pronounce your last name, Dan?
That's fine. That works for me.
Yeah, how would you say it?
Malakin's fine.
Would you be Malakin?
I think Malakin is probably it's not actually my real name. So
is it not? Wow. So we
it's
can
kind
just
of like it's kind of part of my real name, but I have a professional career which I like to keep a little bit separate.
Fabulous, fabulous. I think that is one of the wondrous things about writing fiction, you know, that we can have that persona. Because
Yes.
I'm intrigued as how, you know, authors who maybe veer off from the genre that they're known in, or they write standalones under a different name, and that's the beauty of fiction, being able to do so. But for the purpose of this, I shall just call you Dan, if that's okay.
Dan is my name. That is actually my real first name, so you can call me.
So for anybody who is not familiar with Dan and his work, he's been shortlisted twice for the Bridport Prize, and his debut novel, The Regret, was a Kindle bestseller, and I'm sure some of you have been there and thoroughly enjoyed. But as Dan says, Dan has another career elsewhere, working in IT and data security. And I love this, teaching corporations how to protect themselves from hackers. And, you know, there's always, you know, there's even more need for these things these days. So thank you for the work that you do in that area as well, Dan. But today, in this consultation, we're here to talk about your latest novel, and what a novel it is, the action thriller called The Box. And later I might ask you about The Box, if we can go there without giving too much away. By that I mean the actual box itself. The novel was released by Viper Books in June 2022. And well, so here we are to discuss. Yeah, hello. I will just say this, probably a novel that lesser mortals would have maybe shied away from, and should say as well, as we discuss this novel, there are some tricky issues, and we will treat those with care. But I want to thank you, Dan, for raising those issues, because we do need to consider, and you know, society is full of those things that are difficult. So bless you for penning this novel. What I wanted to start with, though, is to ask you the journey between The Regret and The Box, because The Regret was released in 2019.
That's right.
And here we are, we're doing this recording in 2022.
2022, so it's a good 3 years.
After. Can you share with us what happened in the meantime? And, well, just all that has gone on so that today we can enjoy The Box.
Okay, well, it is quite a gap of 3 years, and the main reason for that is the lead-in time for traditional publishing, because The Regret was released by Bloodhound Books, who are an indie publisher. So they bought The Regret almost as soon as the last word was written. I'd actually sent it to them before I finished the last draft, because I'd met Fred at Bloodhound at Harrogate. And I pitched in the idea at Harrogate, and he was like, "This sounds like something right up our street." So I just sent it to them almost before it was even finished, and they really enjoyed it, and they almost took it almost as is. I just did a copy edit of it and released it. They could release it very quickly, so that was sold and released before I'd even written a word of The Box, and I guess that accounts for the biggest gap. And the books did take me a long time to write because I do work full time and I've got a young family. So,
yeah,
you know, it's, and I'm also quite a slow writer, just not necessarily in terms of daily word count, but in terms of, you know, some writers will write 3 books a year and they'll go through a draft and they'll be finished and that's it. They'll have it published. Whereas I'm very much the process that needs to change, I guess. But whereas I'll write it and then rewrite it and then rewrite it again and rewrite it again. So I probably need to speed up a little bit. I'd say. I'm sure the public Viper will be happy. I think if I speed it up.
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? I think this is one of the. I know there's a number of tricky questions in literature production and publishing, but if you have a style, if you have a way of doing, and as you say, it's not the only thing that you do. You're juggling a number of balls there, and in order for what you produce to be of quality, I would argue that it was worth waiting that time.
Very, very kind of you to say. Very kind of you to say. And I guess one of the great things about being someone like Viper now, who are a lot more established as a publisher, is I'm working with a really great team, just the whole team, with the editors, especially the editors, and I think what because my next book isn't going to be out for another 2 years because I'm obviously quite a way into it now, but they have a release schedule and I wasn't in time to hit my target, which I wanted to hit, of next summer, and my book is being pushed. The second book in the deal I've got with them is being pushed back to the summer afterwards because they really want to release it in the summer. And that's part of it as well. So working with this great team now, I am hoping when I've got more people around me to be able to increase my production, because as you say, it's worth waiting if it's good, but if you can produce what's good a bit faster, then that's better.
Yeah, maybe something to aim for, but I honestly would say to you, please do not sacrifice quality.
Absolutely. It's very much about writing good quality books, and that's, I'd rather write one good quality book every 2 years than 2 or 3 average books a year. I mean, that's absolutely true.
Exactly, because I think again, I mean, we are as readers, we are spoiled. There is
so spoiled.
Yeah.
So many great books are there. I can't even. I have a pile of books, especially now since it's been published. I get sent a lot of books as well, and they're all great. They're all pre-publication proofs, and especially the Viper books. Some of the Viper authors that got. I read these books and these are fantastic, and I never need to buy a book again. But it also means that my TBR pile is just.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for my Kindle, it would be ridiculous.
I mean, is it not true? That the day job. I mean, speaking for myself, the day job gets in the way. I'm grateful for the day job, but
very grateful for the day job.
Yeah, those books, they do, as you say, they either queue up on your Kindle or the piles are there. Yeah, I've started taking, when publishers who are so kind and say, we'd like you to interview, an author like yourself, and they say, can we send you a copy? And I say, well, in order to keep the peace at home, could you send me an ebook form?
Okay. We do have in the house, we currently have piles and piles of books just everywhere at random on, side tables, cupboards, on my floor. I'm not going to show my floor, but I have piles of books on my floor at the moment. Yeah. So, but something, I love books. I've always loved books. When I was even 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, it was my first love. I mean, I would go to family gatherings and I'd always be found in the corner on my own reading a book.
It very, very, very comforting, the idea to be surrounded by books. However, sir. Yes. However, being comforted by books. I think it would be fair to say, and I borrowed this from somebody who reviewed the book, because I think this sums it up nicely, a psychological drama adventure story centering around a missing daughter.
Yes, well, that's the crime element.
Yeah, and within that you include elements of, and here, those trigger warnings: misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, incel culture, the alt-right. I mean, it packs a powerful punch, you know, looking at, you know, turning that mirror on society and saying, there's some things not right here. And so, first of all, for any viewers or listeners who haven't read The Regret, to what extent does this change or continue with your style of writing or focus?
I think The Regrets took a lot from my IT knowledge, even though it was very much a psychological thriller based in the domestic setting. So it was a domestic noir psychological thriller. It was very much about a stalker, an online-ish stalker who had all the means available that a top-class hacker would have to really destroy this woman's life and to, you know, completely destroy her mentally so that he could step in and I don't want to give anything away, but
no, you mustn't. No.
I won't give anything away. But you know, that was the premise of it. So I used a lot of my IT knowledge for that. And I guess there's a little bit of that in the box, but I wanted the box to be more of a mainstream read. So I didn't want to get bogged down in technical jargon. Not that The Regret has much technical jargon either, but I think that'll kill the pace of a book. But yeah, so that's something I really brought in. Maybe I think in the future I might be using a bit less of that now. I think that's something I'm trying to get away from a little bit. It was very good, you know, because it kind of helped to distinguish my books from, say, the other 10,000 other psychological writers. To have that kind of, you know, a little bit of professional knowledge to bring into the books, and to know ways that they can be twisted for kind of maximum effect. So so that was very much on show in The Regret, and a little bit in the box as well. Although, as you said, the box is a bit more of an actiony. Actually, there's a lot of action. There's a rooftop chase scene, which was great fun to write. So there's things like that in there, which you didn't really get in The Regret, which is much more of a claustrophobic book.
But the box is set in the UK, is it?
Yeah,
is it not?
Yeah, it's set in London.
That's right. Yeah, but do you know, for me, it really had a feel of the United States as well.
We are very, very influenced by American culture and the culture wars which are coming over from America, and the rise of what's called the alt-right, which is really just a name for kind of, you know, modern right-wing values, I guess, but framed in a kind of internet savvy manner where people can use what's available on the internet, the anonymity and things like that, you know, to cause trouble or to terrorize people with things like doxing or something like that, which is just a horrible thing to happen to someone. And it's what happens to the main character's daughter in the box. Is she gets what's called dox, where someone's private information is posted online and then used by various nefarious actors. You know, whoever wants to, it's a bit of a pile in, isn't it, really? You see it all the time on Twitter. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, as a lot of writers do.
Isn't it interesting, though, how, again, you know, coming back to the other side of your world, you know, with IT and online, how Twitter, as you say, as an author, I mean, it's vital to be...
So vital. Not only to speak to readers, presence. And to have a presence there, but also it's the sharp end of our culture. It's where people go to say what they think, whether it's acceptable, not acceptable, you know, any viewpoint you want to see. I mean, take 10 minutes looking at the response to what happened on the weekends with the royal family, and you find all kinds of views on there, some of them horrible. And, you know, and some people just having like a discussion with, you know, the wider world about how they feel. So it's not all horrible. But people can use that to, you know, to their advantage if they wanted to, you know, the bad aspects of it. Yeah,
but I say, you know, I appreciate, you know, the bringing in, even though it is a tricky subject, and I'm glad to see this, you know, in contemporary crime fiction thriller work. I think it's important.
The great thing is, I've actually read about 3 other books this year which have gone into things like incel culture and things like that, because when I did start writing the books, it was about 3 years ago, and that kind of thing wasn't as well used as a plot thing, and I was a little bit concerned about poking my head over the parapet, as you do, but now it's actually becoming such a common trope in not just crime literature, but literature in general. They mention that, especially incels, that I mean, there's a whole subculture around incels is just the sharp end, but there's many layers of it. Yeah. You know, but thankfully that's becoming more mainstream as well. So my head over the parapet is not so risky these days. You know, there's bigger heads out there.
And yet, and the important thing is that, you know, that issue that we're dealing with. But before we get into talking about that group, which appear in the book, let's turn to the family dynamic.
Okay.
And you know, again, talking to the Irish crime writer Brian McGilloway a few months ago, and that idea of setting your story within a family setting, and I think that, you know, it makes it even trickier. You know, those bonds, those ties that are tested, and the pain that is there when it's a parent-child dynamic. I mean, did you have any second thoughts about setting this story within that family dynamic, or did you know you had to do it like this?
I knew I had to do it because what it started with was the kidnapped daughter. I mean, that's how it started. The whole idea, if I could think back many years ago to what was the nebulous origins of the book, it was very much that idea. And like I say, I spent a lot of time on Twitter and Reddit and other such places, sort of worse places than that. So I kind of soak in the kind of subculture at the moment, and that often comes out in what I'm writing just because I'm interested in it. So I have an interest in it, and I'm always thinking, how can I use this and this? So yeah, but for me, family is very important. You know, I grew up in quite a big family with quite a complex family dynamic. So it's natural for me to set books in that setting. And you know, from a technical point of view, it's the best way to get some sympathy for your main character is to, you know, have a loving father. I mean, he's a damaged loving father, but he is a very loving father who does whatever he can for his kid. But you know, and that sets up the rest of the story, because you want him to succeed all the way through. I mean, and that's the question that's asked at the start, and I'm not going to give anything away, but that's the question that runs through the whole book: is will he find his daughter?
Yes. Is he up to the task?
Is he up to the task?
Yeah, yes. And I think, you know, I mean, I'm thinking of the Liam Neeson films that have a very familiar.
He makes a joke. He makes a Liam Neeson joke near the start, in fact, because he's not Liam Neeson. He's just a normal man, and that's what makes it interesting, because I couldn't write Taken because I'm not Liam Neeson myself. I'm much more like Ed in the book, a bit hapless, a little bit hopeless, but trying my best. You know? So.
But I think, you know, again, that idea of, you know, I wonder how many dads, in particular dads, parents, but I wonder how many dads, you know, will pick up the book and think, gosh, if it were me, what would I
do? Well, that's the question. Yeah. That's the question. What would I do? And you know, I've asked that question myself when I said, well, would I do this? And
would I be capable?
I think that's the bigger question. Could I? Not would I be willing to, but would I be able to?
Yeah. So you made him a lawyer, and a very successful lawyer. Maybe on the home front, you know, he's not initially. He's not maybe the best dad, husband that he could be or should be. Which I thought was interesting. Yeah, but I wondered why the lawyer, Ed the lawyer. I wondered why not another, you know, professional or non-professional, profession for him.
There were plot considerations for that.
Yeah,
he had to be someone professional, because that fitted in with his character and how he would react to it. Because obviously, you know, what the character is for the main character shows how they will react when put into a situation. Like your John Wayne type will react differently to your Woody Allen type. Yeah. You know, he's neither of those characters, but you know, he's very much just a normal dad, you know, and so he's not going to go in all guns blazing, or if he does go out all guns blazing like he does in the first few chapters, he tries to go out to confront these men and then gets knocked down, you know, because he's not a fighter. He's not a fighter, but he has to try and learn to be a fighter. So that's something which interested me a lot, because, you know, like I said, you ask that questions of yourself. What would I do? What would I fight, you know, to save my child? I hope so. I like to think so, but he really goes through the mill.
And find those hidden resources, or being willing to engage with people that you might not engage with, in order to be able to bring it about.
He's very much he's very much on the hero spectrum of things, but so he's not an anti-hero. He's not like a bad who turned good, but he's a damaged hero, I think. You know, who learns to understand himself, and in doing so is able to be a better father. I guess that's the for his takeaway, without giving anything away. That's his journey, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. So there we have Ed, whose daughter is kidnapped. Now that daughter is Ali. Yes. And you know, I absolutely adore the character in the sense of that social justice campaigner. And I think it's okay to say that, you know, she uses that method that was used not long ago in Newcastle with a certain far-right leader, shall we say, that weapon of choice, the milkshake.
She does milkshake. She milkshakes the far-right leader.
Yeah. Sorry.
But you know, but some of the reactions I've had has not been uniformly, you know, because I'm quite a liberal person. I think many writers are, but not all readers are. And and she didn't get as much sympathy as, say, Ed does, you know, because not everyone is a fan of social justice warriors.
Of course.
I guess my sympathy, obviously, but not everyone.
Mine too, but I do understand the idea of, you know, methods of ways to protest, methods of showing one's opposition, and maybe that kind of behavior isn't approved of. I get that, I understand that, but I do appreciate the voices of opposition, resistance from young people. You know, again, working with young people, and I have a lot of hope for the future.
I couldn't agree with you more on this, because I think as people get older, and I'm getting older myself, I'm nearly 50, so I'm, you know, getting to that point where, you know, you do become a little bit entrenched in your views. So, you know, it is harder as you get older, maybe to see the bigger picture. But the fact that young people today are so idealistic and are so keen, you know, with climate, and with tolerance and with diversity, to embrace those things and to stand up when they hear it, you know, being, you know, put down as like, we don't need these things, but actually we do need these things. And it's not going to come usually from the older generation, so it's going to have to come from, because, and like I say, I work at university as well, so it's always heartening to see some good teenage rebellion, some good opposition.
And those voices that ring out, you know, and the future is theirs as well. So
absolutely,
it is so important to listen. So the milkshake is thrown at a certain William Carmichael, the leader of the Men's Learning Centre. What an ironic name to give it.
Look, it just shows how these things can be subverted, because a legitimate men's learning centre may not be a bad thing if you're something which develops skills and, you know, kind of social skills for men, especially for, you know, things like toxic masculinity or vulnerable men or that kind of thing. So it's one of these things where it sounds nice, and if it had those ideals, it would be a fantastic place. But obviously, in this book, it's not. It's a bad place.
That's right. And again, you know, reading, you know, the ideology that's espoused of the notion of putting women back in their place, you know, the idea that if only women would do what they should do, then society
would be, if women were modest, or a bit more modest, or something like that, which is something I'm beginning to hear a few times, which is just a horrible thing to say, you know, this kind of victim shaming of women. If you were different, then you would have been attacked, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Nothing makes me more annoyed than hearing something like that.
Yeah. So tell me.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, and again, you know, without naming anything that might cause problems, this men's learning center, did you base it on any real group that you'd researched?
Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, I do spend a lot of time on internet subcultures, and I do spend a lot of time on places like the dark web, looking at some of the darker forums on there, and gauging some of the, you know, reactions to modern events and cultural, you know, shifts, and everything that is in the book is stuff which I've seen written firsthand of people's opinions, not just opinions, but tactics that groups like these use to infiltrate. There's a scene quite late in the book, I won't give too much away, where someone talks about how he infiltrated a Facebook group for women's romance novelist fans, like romance fans, got in with the administrator, became an administrator, and they just destroyed the group, you know. So just deleted the group. So they obviously created a fake ID, got themselves friendly with all the admins, got themselves made admin, and then just deleted the group. So that kind of thing that people were boasting about on these kind of forums. Obviously, great for a writer to use that, but gave me a real chill when I read that. That was like, I thought that's so petty and cruel to do so, that just so you can boast about it on a forum afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I wonder, you know, how many of us are aware of these things. You know, I think many of us don't go as far as probably you have gone, you know, looking at this other side, going, you know, to the dark web. I think sometimes, you know, it's safer, easier for us to keep away from that. And that's why I say, I think it is so good that you've taken, you know, brought that aspect into the writing, because you keep it safe for us to go there and understand the kind of things that are happening.
I think you're right. I think there is this not a lack of knowledge, but just people don't know how invested some bad actors are in riling up this kind of, I don't know, it's not anti-Western, it's just anti-liberal. You know, there are some people who are really intent on shifting the conversation towards a different place, or shifting society towards a different place. And they're willing to put in time, resources, and money into doing that, into creating things like troll farms, which do exist, where you'll have either bots or rooms full of coders or hackers sitting around and just basically generating this noise, this internet noise, in order to shift the conversation towards, you know, something else, something bad, you know, like a subversion of the Me Too hashtag. That was something else which I saw there as well, where, you know, people would say, well, you know, it's like a backlash against Me Too, like, you know, we want the strong men back, you know, we don't want these feminized men, we don't want these sissies, you know, and they'd put that out there as though they were from legitimate women saying, I'm sick of this, but actually these are just men sat in a room concocting all this. So
yeah,
I know it's a bad place, but, you know, I mean, knowledge is power, you know. And
indeed, without a doubt. Now, there's another person I'd like us to spend a little bit of time on, because whilst Ed embarks on the finding of the daughter, and we'll go back there in a minute, we do have the police investigation that is part of this.
Oh yes, Jackie, I love Jackie, and in fact, I've been speaking to my agent this week, because I would love to do a standalone set of books with her as the
Excellent.
I really would love to do that.
That is music to my ears, because
because I think she's great.
Yeah, you have created a cracker of a DCI there.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm always keen on, not was she inspired in someone else, but when you began the box, was she there already, or did she come along after everything had been set in motion?
So a lot of not the themes of the book, because that implies some kind of conscious thought, but something which I've always been very interested in, which I always bring into the books, is the idea of, you know, gender stereotypes and what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman. So what I had for her in mind was what would not like what if she was a man, but what if she had kind of like almost like male traits? How would she be perceived then? Because she's a take no prisoners, jiu-jitsu, fighting, you know, and keeping everyone in her team under control, you know, and very successful as well. You know, she's smart, she's capable. And I wanted to, I didn't want it to be like seen as a woman DCI. I wanted it to be seen as a strong person. And that was very important to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think she's great. I would love to do a whole set of books with her. Yeah, maybe fingers crossed. I've got to get signed off though these days. Long gone are the days where I could sit down. I could just sit down on my computer and start writing.
Yeah.
These days, everything's got to be signed off.
Yeah, so. I think it's, you know, it's the price to pay, isn't it? For, you know, people want your work, which is brilliant, but within certain, you know,
yeah. But it's definitely a new way of working, which you know, and it's part of the reason why the second book has been pushed back, and I'm going to do details on it. But you know, this kind of slower process of starting and of structuring it before I begin, outlining it a lot more than I used to. I'm finding quite slow progress, whereas before I'd just get cracking, I'd write a first draft in 3 months, and then I'd probably have to rewrite it again because it's terrible. But you know, so that is yeah, that's something which has changed, I guess. But yes. Sorry, what was the question? I forgot the question half through my answer.
Just the idea of being able to
yeah. But the publishers, I mean, I can't fault Viper. They've just been one publisher imprinted of the year, so you know, I feel very, very privileged to be working with them. Is how I see it, and if I have to change my way of working to suit them, then I'm happy to do so.
Yeah.
You know, and in the long term, because I'm still just starting out, I've had 2 books out. I've actually been writing a very long time, for nearly 20 years. But in terms of writing novels, and in writing novels, crime novels to be published, it's only in the last 3 or 4 years. So, you know, to be taken on board by Viper, who are very keen to help me develop a career in crime writing, I'm more than happy to work to their routines and their schedules, even if it means a slight upheaval now while we're getting started. So.
Yeah. Again, flexibility and that ability to develop, I think is a very positive trait. You know, and to see what can happen with a novel, you know, that because it is organic, you know,
it is organic, very organic.
Yeah, and you know, again, I sometimes wonder. And again, the sign of a good book, when that final page is turned, you know, it's there in print, it's there on the screen, that there's still all the what might happen afterwards to characters.
But this is why I want to write the books with Jackie, because I don't feel her story is finished. And I don't feel, without going anything away, I don't feel her story with Benedict is finished either. And I think there's a lot more to come from that. Because obviously, I nearly gave a spoiler away. Obviously, at the end, this is what happens. I won't say anything more, but I don't think their stories or their relationship together is finished. I think there's more to come.
Brilliant. Now, if we can just touch on another dynamic, and that is between Ed and Phoenix. So that's Ali's friend, Phoenix, yeah?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, of you know, what happens to them, you know, and how they function together.
Well, in a similar way to Jackie's character, I didn't want Phoenix to be some kind of manic pixie dream girl kind of character. I wanted to be very smart, very capable, very resourceful, not a shrinking violet or a damsel in distress. I wanted her to be, you know, the driving force of the book, and I think she is. I think if it's not for her, then nothing else happens, you know. So and she helps Ed along the way. He learns from her because she kind of, it's hard to say, you know, he sees a lot of his relationship with Ali in how Phoenix is with her father. So and he measures himself against that and finds himself wanting.
And I wonder as well, you know, that idea of it's easier to view aspects, characteristics in others and maybe appreciate them in a way that we haven't been able to when they are exhibited in those closest to us. You know, I often think
it's hard to see it sometimes when you're so close to it, and you know, and Ed is, you know, obsessed with his work and has, you know, a drinking problem. It's told very early he has a drinking problem, like many middle-aged men do, I guess, middle-aged professional men. That was also a big part of this, to draw attention to that you know, is, you know, men have problems too, you know. I mean, that's you know, big, you know, I think we are past that generation where men suffer in silence, but I think Ed was maybe at the end of that generation. And I think part of the book is him coming to terms with that and what happened with his father, which is also part of the book, and how that cascaded through to how he is with his children, and to break that chain of, you know, that generational chain of what men used to be like and what men are like now. And yeah, that was very important. I think Phoenix is very much the catalyst for that, you know. Yeah. And Phoenix's character is also great as well. I do like her a lot.
Yeah. I think this is it. You know, you have given us in this book a whole set of characters that, you know, they're long after the last page is turned, and it's like, yeah.
I'm so pleased you enjoyed it.
Yeah. I only have one regret. It made me wish I was, you know, that I were younger.
Well, we all wish that.
With the idea of being part of, you know, the resistance, and with that energy. I'm part of the resistance. I just don't have that same level of energy. I loved it, but I'm aware of time, and you've been so generous talking to us about the book. So I've got two questions to finish off, and so my penultimate one is, every reader takes something away from a book. There's no doubt about it. But if there were one thing that you could wish for us that we took away or that stayed with us, what would it be?
Oh, wow, that's a question. I think, you know, it's not necessarily the theme of the book, but I think what you said before about understanding that world, and that world does exist, this kind of trolling, manipulative, culture shifting, you know, bad actors out there. And I think to have that understanding that, for example, when you go on Twitter and you post something and then you get a load of abuse from people, you know, to understand that they may not be real people. They may be, you know, someone trying to incite you, or someone or it might be just a bot, you know. So that kind of thing is a good takeaway. And, you know, I guess if you could take something from Ed's personal journey, you know, as a middle-aged father, maybe you might read it, and that'll be good as well. If they can maybe sit back and go, oh, you know something, maybe my relationship with my kids isn't as good as it could be, and maybe if I didn't drink so much, it might be better. Then that could be a nice thing to take away.
Yeah. I like that. And lastly, that idea of looking at a book, you know, in its completed form, and only you and your publisher and editor know everything that's gone on in it reaching us. Is there an aspect that didn't make the cut, shall we say?
The box. Oh wow, there's a lot that didn't make the cut.
So I'm going to ask you to choose one. I know that might be tricky, but that you might then be saving for another project.
I think one thing which was much more developed in an earlier draft, which I would love to develop again, was this idea of a youth resistance against the alt-right. And without giving too much away, Phoenix and Ed in their journey joined up with a larger group of kind of freedom fighting, anti-trolling, you know, rebellion people. But the decision was made to take that out, those scenes out, because they just didn't. They kind of slowed the pace too much, because it happened right in the middle of the book when there was like a kind of emotional bits between Ed and Phoenix, and then jump onto the next bit of action. And then there were all these scenes where they were introducing lots of characters and they were making plans together of what to do. And I had to, you know, under good advisement, cut those out. But I would love to do something a bit more with that, you know, because, you know, it's something which interests me. I love this idea of youth culture rising up and leading us to a better future.
Yeah. Dan, I wholeheartedly endorse that. I really look forward to see, you know, to be able to come back to you and say, you did it. You got that back in the book. Yeah. But for now, we'll draw our conversation to a close. Viewers, listeners, get hold of the box. Be taken on this amazing adventure, and then let us know what you think about Dan's writing, and taking us to a place that maybe we don't go or unnerves us slightly, but I think you do it in an excellent way, Dan, and just all the very best with the box.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure, and hope to see you face to face at some point soon. Yeah,
I hope so.
Thanks for now. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, bye.
Bye.